Before I even got to work, I had a bad feeling about my shift for the night. According to the local news, the past few weeks had seen an increase in robberies. This had me on edge, jumpier, and more nervous than I normally was. I was a tall, skinny guy, so I figured I was an easy target for anyone just walking on the street. But I had also heard stories and seen clips of rideshare drivers and people in restaurants getting robbed. With criminals getting more aggressive and creative, I always dreaded running into the wrong house on a delivery. The evening shift I was working was relatively busy, but I had been going to many familiar clients, office workers, local students, and regulars at the Chinese restaurant I worked for. In the middle of my shift, I got an order to deliver to an address I had visited before. I had become somewhat familiar with the family that lived there. They loved ordering out on Friday nights. I always looked forward to bringing them food because they tipped well and seemed like genuinely nice people. I leaned on the counter as my coworker bagged up the order. It looked like they all had their usuals of lo mein, rice, chicken, and wontons. "Be careful out there, Danny," she teased. "This could be a trap." Pfft, the Woods family is the sweetest. She stuck her tongue out at me as I grabbed the food and left. After taking a deep breath, I turned on my car and punched the address into my phone. The ride over was smooth, and I enjoyed the relief that came with delivering to regulars. All of that changed when I pulled up to the house. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was some kind of tension in the air. I was on edge again. I hoped that seeing Mr. and Mrs. Woods might bring me back to that calm state. Before I rang the bell, there was a loud crash, as if someone had dropped something. I could have sworn I heard a man's voice, but it didn't sound like Mr. Woods. I rang the bell and waited anxiously for the door to open. Again, I heard a low voice, as if someone was trying not to be heard. It was impossible to make out any words. The door creaked open, and Mrs. Woods stood there. Immediately, I could tell something was off. The most striking difference was that her eye makeup appeared smudged and runny, as if she had been crying. Her normally warm smile seemed forced tonight. Then there was her body language. She seemed scared. "Is everything okay, Mrs. Woods?" "Yeah, no, everything is fine. Chuck and I just got into an argument," she said as she looked back and wiped under her eye. Something still felt off, but I didn't want to be rude or push any boundaries, since I was just their delivery driver. I lifted the bag to check the receipt. "That'll be $29.76. A look of worry shot over her face. "Oh, shoot. I actually don't think I have enough cash, and Chuck is upstairs. Can I pay by card?" Yeah, just 1 second. As I pulled a portable card reader from my belt, she shuffled through her wallet and got her card. A heavy breathing sound gave me goosebumps. That breathing was too heavy to be Mrs. Woods. I looked around but didn't see anyone. When the reader processed her card, I handed it to her with a stylus. "I just need your signature." Her hands seemed to shake as she wrote something on the reader. When she gave it back, I felt frozen in place. It read, "Call 911." Something was wrong, and I needed to get out of there. "Is there anything else I need to do?" No. Here's your food, Mrs. Woods." I handed her the bag and reattached the reader to my belt. "Enjoy the meal and have a good night." She began to reply when the door shut and cut her off. I stood there for a moment before turning to walk back to my car. I fought my instinct to run back because I wanted to appear as normal as possible. As soon as I was in the safety of my car, I gasped and caught my breath. My heart was racing. I dialed 911 and set my phone to speaker so anyone looking in wouldn't be able to tell that I was on the phone right away. When the operator answered, I quickly gave them the address. They listened as I explained the situation as best I could. It was unclear if there was a domestic violence issue or a robbery. Either way, the Woods family needed the cops. Luckily, there was a squad car nearby, and officers arrived within minutes. As they approached the house, I made another call to let my manager know there was an issue. I wanted to stay behind in case they needed a statement or something. Luckily, the criminals inside gave up as soon as they knew they had been caught. The officers didn't need a statement from me or anything like that, but I at least got to see the mom again and wave goodbye as I drove off back to work. I spent a good portion of my life growing up in a cult. It robbed me of a lot of experiences I was slowly catching up on. I was a young teenager when my family was swept up into everything. Despite being brainwashed and forced to do things I didn't understand, I felt more nervous about starting my first job. Delivering pizzas seemed simple enough. Without much of an education, driving was one of the only skills I had. But ever since I escaped, meeting people scared me. I had extended family outside the cult. Fortunately, they were kind enough to take me in after everything went down. They helped me get set up at a family friend's restaurant with a delivery job. They even got me a cheap car with a GPS. I entered the pizzeria and shook hands with the owner. We met once before, when my cousin was pitching me as a loved one who needed a fresh start. Tony was kind enough and accepted me. He showed me around and introduced me to the other workers. Tony also said that I'd help with cleaning when I wasn't delivering, which was fair enough to me. I had been cleaning the windows when Tony called me over and said I had my first delivery. As I put everything away, he got the address ready for me and got the other staff on the order. When he handed me the card, I felt the slightest wave of unease wash over me. The delivery was to a place in Boulder County. That name was familiar, but I couldn't remember why. I took the card and thanked Tony, assuring him that I wouldn't let him down. An opportunity like this may have been difficult to find again, so I didn't want to screw it up. Not long after, the food was ready. I packed up 2 boxes of pizza into a carrier bag and took off. The car purred as the engine turned on. I entered the address into the GPS, just like my cousin taught me to. The location was only 15 minutes away. I was relieved it wouldn't be a long ride. The route to the location took me out of the small rural town. At that point, it was dirt roads and cornfields. Even though it all looked the same, something about this road was familiar. The car still handled relatively well, taking me to the location within the specified 15 minutes. The unease returned when I saw a 2-story house off the side of the road. That house belonged to another family friend, one who became a leading member of the cult. Memories came back, and I saw him lying still on the ground, with blood pouring from his head. My older brother killed him and made me leave. I didn't think I could ever forget the pain in his face when he told me to run. I realized I had been sitting in the car for a few minutes, just staring at the house. Surely with Tom gone, someone else lived there. As I got the food and stepped out, I took a closer look at the house. It looked the same as it had years ago. Nerves overwhelmed me as I stepped onto the porch and rang the doorbell. It felt like an eternity passed before the door creaked open. An older woman I had never seen before smiled from behind the door. "Hi, ma'am. Pizza for Beverly?" "Thank you so much. Could you bring them in while I get my purse?" Even though the request was reasonable, something about it felt off. Still, I obliged, carrying the food inside for her. She led me to the kitchen so I could set the pizzas down. As I opened up the bag and took them out, I heard her steps fade. I took a deep breath and waited patiently for her return. I heard her slow, faint steps returning. My heart felt like it was ready to explode when I saw she was in a red robe. It was the same kind of robe I had seen during rituals over the years. I turned to leave when a robed figure blocked the doorway to my right. 2 more people came in. One of them took off the hood, revealing a familiar face. I stared in disbelief at Tom, the man I thought had died. His face bore a wicked scar on the right side. That eye looked clouded as well. "Hello, Andy. Welcome back. Tom, I thought you were dead?" "No, your brother only knocked me out when he sent you away from us. He was punished shortly after." I wondered what had happened to my brother since he hadn't escaped like I had. "What do you want?" I backed away, looking around for anything I could grab and use as a weapon. "You may remember that we started a ritual that night. You were a chosen one, Andy. You were supposed to ascend." When he said ascend, the other members echoed the word. "Ascend, ascend, ascend." "You killed them all." "I understand you've been told to look at it that way. This world has nothing but pain for people like us. So I sent them to the next life, a life with gifts. Now it's your turn to ascend." "Ascend, ascend," the other robed figures chanted again. You killed my family. They ascended, ascended, ascended. My fists clenched. I felt my heartbeat thumping in my temple as they closed in. My mind raced back to that night when my brother realized they were going to kill us. He grabbed a rock and bludgeoned several people to knock them out. We ran, but they cut us off. He told me to keep running and never look back. Now, why don't you come with me, Andy? I grabbed a chair and hoisted it up for a big swing. Two of the cult members approached me from the left. I threw the chair at them and then tackled the guy on the right. Surprisingly, he fell over, and we both hit the floor hard. I scrambled to my feet and ran to the next room. There were candles everywhere and a sigil in the middle of the room. When one of the men entered the room, I knocked over several candles between us. The flames rose and cut him off. I rounded a corner to where the front door was and tried to open it. The knob wouldn't budge. I began slamming the door with my body weight, trying to force it open. Still, it wouldn't give. I heard more chants as Tom rounded the corner I came from. He brandished a knife. However, the ends of his robe caught fire. The old man staggered towards me and swung his weapon. I stepped back, dodging as best as I could. The more we moved, the more the flames danced up his robe. Soon he screamed, paying more attention to himself than to me. With that, I grabbed another chair and shattered the closest window I could find. Shards of glass stung me as I jumped through and landed on my side. The pain wasn't enough to slow me down. I ran back to the car and got inside. The flames began enveloping the house. Smoke polluted the night sky. Someone else emerged from the home, only they too were covered in flames. Within seconds, they collapsed. I turned the car on and immediately drove back the way I came. Everything after that point was a blur. At one point, I think I contemplated just driving as far away as I could. Instead, I found myself back in the restaurant. Cops and paramedics came for me. Firefighters were sent to put out the blaze. I didn't hear anything about how many bodies were found in the house, but I hoped that I never had to be reminded of that time in my life ever again.